Hey, choice feminists, newsflash, but we are all very well aware that women are allowed to be wives and moms. We know.
Oh, y'all are not gonna like this one.
Blah, 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 blah. We know divine feminine, soft feminine life, fulfill your purpose. We know. We get the picture.
You're listening to Hot Takes by Anna.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to Hot Takes by Anna. Thank you for being here for episode 4. And we are just going to get right into it today because I have a lot to cover. As you can see, based on the title of this episode, I am going to be talking about choice feminism. And for those who aren't clear on exactly what that is, we'll get into that a little bit later. But for those who are familiar with the term and perhaps may align themselves with that ideology, this episode might be a little bit uncomfortable, but as always, my purpose is just to challenge previously held ideas that we've all had at some point in time, and perhaps just challenge everyone to think a little bit deeper, think a little bit out of the box. So today, I just want to challenge this idea that I think mainstream feminism has been doing a really good job of selling to all of us, and for good reason, right? And we're going to get into that right now. So let's start from the beginning for those who may not be familiar with the term choice feminism. So what is meant by this phrase? Choice feminism. This is the title that's given to this mentality of, well, feminism is not about telling women what to do. It's just saying that we think women should have the choice to do whatever they want to do, right? We believe that a woman should be allowed to be a CEO if she so chooses. However, women should also be allowed to be a wife and mom and stay home with the children if they do desire to stay in a more traditional role. So this is a very popular ideology for a reason, right? And I used to definitely subscribe to this mentality, right? I think on the surface, it's very well-meaning, and I think it is to a degree true. I think most feminists at the core, if we were all to sit down and discuss this, I think we would all agree that the end goal is for women to be able to choose their own path, right? So not inherently incorrect. That being said, I think if we're going to look at choice feminism with a more critical lens, we have to dig deeper into the dynamics of what really makes something a choice. What really makes a choice, right? And I think that many people look at this concept of choice very, very literally, and through a very just kind of black and white lens, right? You know, well, if no one's holding a gun to your head, forcing you to have babies and to be a housewife, then you don't have to do that. So then you have the choice, right? But this is completely ignoring all of the dynamics, all of the indoctrination, and all of the messaging that women are receiving from the moment they're born, right? So if you're being told all of your life, like, hey, you can do what you want, you know, you can go to school, get educated, do the whole career nonsense for a few years, but ultimately your sole purpose and your highest calling in life is to be a wife and mother. If that's the messaging you're receiving your entire life, and it makes it naturally very difficult to decide to deviate from that path. Right? And so, yes, I understand that while it may not be a law, not yet at least, we'll see what the next few years of this administration have to say about that. But as of right now, no, there is no law. No, there's nothing written in writing that says every woman must do this and they must live a more traditional life. Again, that does not mean that it's so cut and dry that, you know, women have the right to choose. And I've seen a lot of pushback on this online. I think it's very interesting being in several different types of feminist and women's empowerment circles. You'll see just different ideas, right? And one pushback on kind of my line of thinking with choice feminism, right? And me saying, hey, I'm not sure that women really do have a true choice. I have seen a piece of feedback that I believe is valid to a degree. And that pushback is that, well, if you're saying that, women really don't have a choice, we're still forcing them to be wives and moms. And if we're saying that, it's infantilizing women, right? I think the line of thinking there is that, no, women are big girls at the end of the day. They can put on their big girl panties and they can still choose to deviate from a traditional path, and it's fine. Women have the capability to do this. And again, I understand that. I can see the validity in that critique. However, when I say that women don't really have a choice, I hope it's clear that I'm not speaking about the women as individuals themselves, right? As you all know, I very much think that women are capable of quite literally anything, and I don't say that to be cliche. But again, no matter how capable you are, right? It's not really about capability past a certain point. If you're living in a world, in a society where you've been indoctrinated, men have been indoctrinated, everyone's been indoctrinated into this patriarchal way of thinking where, again, while in this modern era, I think that I've talked about this in my first episode, right? About places where I believe that sometimes mainstream feminism misses the mark a bit. And this idea of perceived equality, right? I think a lot of mainstream feminism runs on the premise that we're already in an equal society. And yes, we still have these issues and, we still... parts of the world, they're still dealing with a lot of violence from men. But for the most part, women can do everything a man can do. And as we talked about in that first episode, that's not an entirely correct premise. It's not really giving the full picture of what's happening here. So again, when I say that I don't believe that women are really able to make a choice about what they do with their lives in this society, I'm not shaming the women. I think women are more than capable, but it does not matter how capable you are if you are being subjected to very traditional messaging or whatever the messaging may be. When I'm talking about this idea of, okay, do women truly have a choice? One really good example, or I guess just recent example that comes to mind is an interview I was listening to a few days ago. I was actually listening to an interview that the vice president's wife, Usha Vance, did with Meghan McCain. And I thought it was very interesting because, we read a lot about Usha Vance. She's very much in the news. We know that she's J.D. Vance's wife. We know that she is a woman of color. And I know a lot of people are often very confused as to why she's married to him. Valid confusion there. But I just became a little bit curious the other day. I just kind of was going down a rabbit hole, actually doing some research for another one of my episodes that's coming up, and decided to just start kind of Googling her and like, hey, what is this lady about? How did she end up with him? Just became really curious about her life story and stumbled upon this interview she did with Meghan McCain. And she was answering a lot of questions that I had. She was sharing with Meghan a lot about her life and how she met JD, her early life, her education, her career, her family life at home now, their children. And one thing that I thought was very, very interesting, Meghan McCain at one point asked her about the dynamics of religion in their home, and especially when it comes to their children. And, Usha Vance, she is very open about the fact that she was raised and still is Hindu. That's how she identifies. And then JD, he is Catholic. I think he converted at some point later in life. But he is now Catholic, and they both are very, very firm in their religious beliefs. And again, I think Meghan McCain had the valid question of how does this play out with your children? And in short, Usha responded that they are going to let the children choose when they get old enough, right? So they are exposing them to both religions, and then when they're older and out of the house, they can decide if they want to continue following one or the other, or if they don't want to do that at all, they're going to leave the choice up to the children, which is great in theory, sounds fair, right? Well, when Usha started getting into the details of how this plays out in their day-to-day life in terms of how they expose the children to the different religions, Usha shared that the children go to Catholic school, right? That's where they do all their schooling. They go to church as a family every week. And even though Usha is, again, she is not Catholic, she considers herself Hindu, she still goes to church with the family. And so they're getting the weekly church. They're going to the Catholic school. And when asked how they get exposure to their Hindu side of the family, Usha said that, well, this year we think we're going to do something for Holi, or something along those lines. But implying that in the past, they actually don't typically celebrate Hindu holidays or festivals or anything like that. And she said that the main exposure that my children tend to get to that side of the family, the religion, the culture, is through her parents, right? Their grandparents. And so anyway, you guys probably already can kind of see where I'm going with this. She's saying that they want to give their children the right to choose which religion they want to follow when they get older. But, and again, especially right now, these children are very, very young. I think they're all below like 8 years old. And so what they're seeing and hearing and being exposed to on a day-to-day basis is the Catholic education, the church, the Catholic traditions, the Catholic rituals, and it's sounding like there's not a ton of exposure to their Hindu side. So I think this is a very similar dynamic, right? You can sit there and say, well, they're technically not forcing Catholicism on the children. They're technically giving them a choice. But you've got young minds. We should all know how these things work from a psychological standpoint at this point. It's just, is it truly a choice? So I thought that was a really good example of how, of this dynamic of women living under a patriarchal system. If a woman doesn't want to marry a man, have children, end up doing the traditional stay-at-home wife thing, yes, she technically can do that, right? Like I said, there's no law against it. There's nothing materially stopping her, at least in the U.S. and as of right now. However, I think until women are being conditioned to believe that it's just as valid of a life path to not do that, I think until we've reached that point, I will unfortunately not be able to agree with the concept of choice feminism. I believe that if we are eventually able to live in a world where women are being told from birth, hey, you really can do whatever you want to do, and women are seeing tons of examples out there of women who are choosing to walk a different path and do something a little bit more non-traditional, and they are seeing women like that represented in the media everywhere around them, and seeing these women live full and fulfilling lives without pushback. Until we're at that point, I'm not going to be able to sit here and confidently say, like, yes, women do have a choice, and I agree with choice feminism, and yes, women should be allowed to do whatever they want. I think it's also, at this point in time, and again, like I said before, I understand the original intentions behind choice feminism were pure. They were good, right? There is nothing inherently wrong with the sentiment that, yes, women should be allowed to choose. Yes, great. We all agree on that. But I think we've reached a point in time where it's really, not only do I not believe women have the choice, right? And we kind of just went over that, but I think it's also just a very unhelpful statement that doesn't really contribute anything to this women's liberation conversation at this point in time, right? We're all well aware that it's okay if a woman is a wife and a mom. Like, you know what I mean? We know that. You've been telling us, you've been telling all of us for years, right? So when you're out here telling women, hey, by the way, it is still okay if you want to be a wife and mother and fulfill this more traditional nuclear family role that a woman is expected to fill under the structure of patriarchy, that's okay. When you're saying that, again, I mean, you can probably see how this is not contributing a lot. It's almost gives me kind of a all lives matter type of vibe, right? You know, if you're advocating for a specific type of pediatric leukemia, right, that is afflicting a very small percentage of children across the world, but is very, very serious. And, you know, we're wanting to promote awareness of this and increase medical funding. And then, you know, you've got people over here like, well, what about the other types of cancer? It's like, we know it, right? That's already implied that people know there are other types of cancer that exist, and we need to be, and all of them are equally terrible, and all of them need attention and should all be receiving the medical research funding, right? So I think that when we're talking about this idea of women deserving the choice in terms of what life path they take, and we're spending a lot of time reassuring women that do want to take a more traditional path that, hey, it's okay. You're valid too, right? You're valid in wanting to be a wife and mom. I think it really is just shifting the focus away from where it really needs to be and putting it on an issue that is just, it's well known at this point, right? I think what we're trying to do is truly empower women and truly say, you do have the choice, right? And when we've been told for thousands and thousands of years that there really was only one option, I don't think that we need to be reassuring women that it's okay to choose that option that everyone already knows is okay. And again, was truly the mandated life path for women for so long. Honestly, a lot of you have probably noticed lately that this is a narrative that even a lot of men are starting to cling on to, right? And for me personally, that's typically a sign when I see a lot of men kind of co-opting popular feminist narratives. I'm like, it's not always a bad sign, but I do think it's something that should cause you to maybe pause, take a step back, and be like, all right, why are the men agreeing with this? But I think the reason why a lot of men are jumping on board with this idea of, yeah, like, totally, women should be allowed to choose, right? Like, we agree with that too, is because it's placating, right? At the end of the day, that's all it is. It's placating women. It's saying, hey, yes, you know, we agree with you. Do your little feminism thing. But at the end of the day, they also know damn well that women are receiving this very, very strong messaging, this very, very strong indoctrination about what our true purpose is from the moment we're born. And I do think that a lot of men truly do believe that women should get educated and they should work. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's, you know, hey, do whatever you want, do all that nonsense, but this better end in you marrying, settling down, and having babies for a man. And so I think we just need to look at this whole idea of choice feminism with a more critical lens, right? And I think we need to think about how we as women, we as feminists, we as people who want women to be liberated, how are we as individuals and as a collective bringing light to the issues that really, really need attention the most right now? And listen, I understand that we're dealing with a lot under patriarchy, right? There are this whole thing needs to be attacked from multiple angles, and I get that. But when the focus is to truly empower women to choose whatever they want to do, then where do we need to be putting our time and energy to make sure that that's where the focus remains? And so I think that, again, choice feminism, while it served its purpose while it did, I think there was a point in time and in history where that was a very revolutionary statement to say, right? But I simply don't think that's the reality we're living in now. I no longer think that there's really anything edgy or revolutionary being said when we say women should have a right to choose, and if that means they're going to be a wife and mom, cool. It's just not adding any value anymore. And so now I believe we're at the point where the focus needs to remain on showcasing women that are living unconventional lives and promoting the idea that, hey, this is possible. This is possible for young women. This is possible for women of any age. if you don't feel that this is something authentic to you to live this more traditional life, you can do it, and you can do it while with pushback. As we've discussed, we still live in a society where there will be pushback, but there are women out here doing it. I'm an example. There's plenty of examples in the media that I believe, especially now, are being more and more silenced as we're seeing this very active movement towards more of this, trad wife culture. And hey, there's the divine feminine, right? The rebranding of, hey, it's not submission, it's not oppression, it's just you choosing to step into your divine feminine role. We're seeing a lot of that, and there's a reason we're seeing a lot of that. And so in order to counteract that, I think while we do still live in this patriarchal reality that no one really wants to acknowledge, right? But as we've established, we do, whether we like it or not. And while we are here, I think that our focus needs to remain on promoting and showcasing a more unconventional life for women, right? I think we need to not lose sight of the fact that this indoctrination is still very, very rampant. It is still very, very much here. And I think we are seeing that there is a very, very active effort at play in the media, and just in the way that laws are now being written and passed to ensure in more subtle ways, right? It's not always in our face, but to ensure in more subtle ways that women stay in their place. And now is the time for us to collectively gather and say, we're not going to stay in our place. And we're aware that we could choose to be wives and moms, but many of us do not want to do that. Or many of us, and I would say probably most of us at this point, want to do way more in addition to that. So let's not give up the fight, ladies. Let's not be derailed by this idea of choice feminism, and understand that while it had its place at a point in time, that is not the mentality that we need to be taking. Things are far too dire. We are regressing in a lot of ways, and I think it is time to make sure that we are keeping our feet on the patriarchy's neck, on these men's necks, and showing that, hey, we are here and we are not buying into that propaganda. We are not even going to spend our time saying that it's okay to live that type of lifestyle, because we already know. We already know it's okay. And what we want to do now is do something different. So I will leave you here for today, but thank you all for joining me, and I will catch you in the next episode. As always, please, please, please share this episode if you think anyone in your life would like it or would hate it. Anything that would give me some engagement, I'll take it at this point. So thanks again for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.